what we heard.
I think they have a responsibility, the politicians, to help us through tough times. I don't have a personal sort of connection with my own local party. I wouldn't even know who it is.
Gordon Brown was my local politician up in Scotland in Kirkcaldy. He had an office in that which you could freely go in.
It's supposed to be an open society, yeah? But regardless of what I say, what you say, what everybody else says, they do what they want.
Personally, I don't feel much of a connection to Westminster, certainly more now that we've gotten the Scottish Parliament.
All the decisions that are made at Westminster affect all of us.
The state opening of Parliament is just like a big pantomime.
Well, I'm happy with it. The more royal, which is the only sort of steady, stable part of Britain, yes, I'm all for it. Whether politicians should bask in the glory is another thing altogether.
Parliament has an important role to play in my life, in the sense that they are there to pass legislation that is for the benefit of the common man.
I don't think you've got much faith in them, really. We haven't got faith in them.
No.
Well, I haven't anyway, because they say one thing and mean another, don't they?
Well, we heard some Scottish perspectives there, some Scottish voters telling us what they thought. Let's welcome Stuart Hosey, the SNP MP, who joins us in the debate now from the Central Lobby. Mr Hosey, thanks for joining us. What are you expecting in today's speech?
Well, I suspect it's been so comprehensively leaked that the bills we've seen all over all the newspapers for the last few days are going to be it. It looks a pretty thin Queen's speech to me. You know, if you were cynical, you would say they were preparing the decks for a snap election, which seems highly unlikely. I suspect the very thin nature of this Queen's speech reflects a government which has simply run out of ideas.
Well, as you're speaking to us, Mr Hosey, I can tell you that the Crown is arriving at the Palace of Westminster, the Imperial State Crown. The Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Ford there, the Controller from Buckingham Palace, brings the Crown to the Sovereign's entrance there at the Victoria Tower, and indeed will then take the Crown into the chamber of the House of Lords itself later on, where it will be put on display in the Royal Gallery before the Queen's speech. So as we look at those images, Mr Hosey, let me ask you whether you think all of the banking crisis that we've been discussing on this programme earlier has in fact weakened the state of the SNP and their claim to the governance of Scotland?
No, absolutely not. I mean, if you look at what's happened over the last year, we had the Northern Rock debacle, but of course that began in the summer of 2007, and the real key, the action that should have been taken, having legislation on the stocks to deal with failing banks, wasn't in place. We only got to the report stage of the banking bill last week. It's now going to be carried over into this next session. We also know that part of the reason for the bank failures was a failure in regulation. We still don't even have new improved regulation to start discussing yet, and this is going to be 2 years after the genesis of the banking crisis. Now, as for the impact it's had on Scotland, it's incredibly disappointing that we've seen RBS in difficulties, HBOS being forced into a shotgun merger with Lloyds TSB. But notwithstanding all of that, if we looked at the pre-budget report last week, this UK government is going to be building up a debt of £50,000 per household in a couple of years. If you look at Norway, a small independent country, with its oil fund, they have a fund to the value of £50,000 per household. So it doesn't change the dynamic of where Scotland's going one bit.
The Imperial State Crown, Mr Hosey, let me tell you, is on its way into the regalia room at the foot of the Victoria Tower there, where it will be polished and prepared to be taken up into the robing room and then into the Royal Gallery itself a little later on. Just a final point, Stuart, if I may, about the way that this political debate has now developed, especially after the Calman Commission, which was published yesterday, talking about the kinds of powers that might be further devolved. Your party said that those findings yesterday were a waste of time. Did you really mean that?
Yeah, I mean, Calman was a done deal from the start, not least because it refused from the outset to consider all of the options. I think the national conversation the Scottish Government have embarked on to look at all of the options to bring everybody to the table is a far healthier and more sensible approach, not least because it considers all the options, particularly independence, and I think that's exactly where the Scottish people are going to get to when the referendum bill is brought forward by the Scottish Government in a few years' time.
Stuart Hosey, good of you to join us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hugh.
Stuart Hosey of the Scottish National Party, and we're all listening intently here in the studio. Has the dynamic changed, Jeff, in terms of the way that devolution has progressed has it created tensions which frankly you prefer were not there?
There's no doubt that there are tensions inevitable between central government and the devolved administrations. I actually think in a modern democracy that's quite healthy, because the whole point of devolution was to allow the Scottish people, and indeed the Welsh people, the opportunity to control directly certain aspects of government as far as they were concerned, aspects that in any event historically had actually been devolved from Westminster, something that's often overlooked. What in effect we've put in place through the devolution legislation is the means whereby there can be popular control of decisions that previously were generally taken by a member of the executive.
We're just watching images there of the imperial state crown being carried now up the Norman staircase, ready to be put on display in the Royal Gallery. Of course, the great symbol of sovereign power, and the state opening, of course, can't take place without the imperial state crown there as the symbol of the Queen's power. And then once Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Ford has placed it in the Royal Gallery with the help of the Lord Great Chamberlain, we'll also be able to see the other elements of the regalia which are used in today's ceremony, which are the